Hello, Empower Nation. I am so blessed and excited. I just spent the last couple of days at Bring Your Deal workshop with Grant Cardone, and I did post a couple of photos, not a ton, because a lot of the information that we talk about at this event is private information. It's still working through some deals, but I at least wanted to bring you some highlights and some ideas for you if you're thinking about getting in real estate investing, or if you have been in real estate investing and you're thinking about maybe pivoting a little bit and learning more about other asset classes. Just wanted to give you some ideas and some experiences from the last few days. Obviously, being in a room with Grant Cardone is incredible. I mean, he's a multi-billionaire, has got, I don't know, $4 billion under assets that he manages, his team manage, and he is in the real estate game every single day, nonstop, on the phone, checking emails. And so when you can get into the room with someone who's such an expert in a field that you're interested in, that's, a huge opportunity. And you may not always have that opportunity. So for me to take that information, spend a few days with my mentor, and then come back here and provide you with some of the highlights and some of ideas that we talked about. So we're actually in 2024, right? And so we've got the election year coming, and there's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of people who are talking about what is the interest rates going to do. Well, none of us have a crystal ball, right? So can't predict the future. If we could, then I probably wouldn't be here doing the podcast. I would be sitting on the beach somewhere, right? So talking to different experts and getting their information on what they see might be happening. So we've had that interest rates up for, the past 18 months here, or past year. It's been 18 months. Yeah. So we're in 2024. I keep forgetting it's January. We're not in 23 anymore. But some people are stating that by the end of the year, we might see rates drop as low as 4%. There are people a little bit more conservative saying that we might see it get around the 6%. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Fed does for the next couple of meetings and how the rest of the year pans out. Why is this important? Well, here's the thing. If you're buying an asset, say you're buying an apartment complex or a storage unit, and you're looking on taking debt, well, you need to make sure that your returns are at least what your interest rate is going to be, because that number is extremely important, but it's hard to meet that. So say, for example, on the smaller side, if you're getting, a 20 unit complex, your interest rate might be 7%. So if you're not returning at least 7% to your investors, then you're in a negative position, right? Because if you're returning 6%, but you're borrowing at 7%, that 1% gap is a negative number. So it's important to think about that. Here in South Florida, and what I hear from a lot of the brokers that are really, trading, or trading is what we call when you're buying and selling the assets. If they're trading assets under that 10 million mark right now in South Florida, so if you have apartment complexes, multi-unit family units under that 10 million mark, they're seeing a lot of activity, which is great, because myself, I've just decided to sell 2 of my assets to go into a bigger asset. And so that market of $10 million and below, we're seeing a lot more activity because people have that kind of cash on hand so that they can purchase an investment without having to go to the debt market, without having to go and get a loan. And so we see a lot of activity there. Now, obviously, if you're not Grant Cardone, you're not coming in and paying cash for your assets. Getting debt can be a little bit more difficult. And I've heard from some of the lenders that their underwriting is really being a little bit more strict. And what they're saying is they're not loaning as much money as they used to on an asset. So for example, if you're buying an apartment complex, if the numbers work, you could borrow 70, 75, 80% to purchase that, and then come up with the rest as the equity or the down payment. Some of the lenders now are looking at the assets and they're saying, well, maybe we don't want to loan 80%. Maybe we don't want to loan 70%. We'll loan you 65%, which means you have to bring the other 35% in cash to the table. So when you see that happening, they're just being conservative, right? They want to make sure that they're loaning on an asset that they're not going to have to take back. They want to make sure that you know how to manage the property. They want to make sure that the team in place buying the asset is experienced. And that's very important too, for the lenders to understand that, and for you to show them what your assets are, that you've been down this path before, right? So it was interesting to see the very difference, all of this going back to the interest rate. It was interesting to see the difference of different experts that have been in the field for a while, that have been in the lending field, have been in the real estate field, in the commercial space, how different people are saying that maybe it could go down to 4%, maybe it's going to stay around the 6% by the end of the year. And so we'll wait to see what the Fed does, right? We individually do not have control of that. We just kind of can help predict based on past experiences what it might do. But when you're buying an asset, we're not thinking about what's going to happen with interest rates in the future. That's not the main priority. What we want to look at is, what is this asset? What is this investment producing today? That's what we're going to base the numbers off of. We're not going to think about the future because I have no idea, no control over it, but I need to know what's the performance of it today, because that's what's going to make sense for my investors. That's what we're going to be focusing on, so that we can have the best asset and the best opportunity for investors. So that's a huge takeaway, as well as just making sure that we're keeping in mind, we're not thinking about rent increases. We're not thinking about what the rates will do in the future. What we want to talk about is what's going to happen today, especially if you're just going into it all cash. Then we're not really worrying about what the debt market's going to do. Now, if you do have to get a loan, then yes, you're going to need to consider, if you're getting a loan that has a 5-year lock, what do we need to do to protect the asset and have enough cash on hand should that lock expire and that rate increase, which caught a lot of people in this current cycle. Unfortunately, they went from 3% to 7% interest rates, and you can't just bump up rents or cut your expenses that dramatically in order to kind of counteract and have enough cash on hand to provide money back to your investors to keep that asset going, because you've got expenses. And with here in Florida, we've had, crazy insurance, and that's been an extremely tough market for a lot of people. And part of the reason why I was selling my smaller assets is because when you have smaller assets, the cost per unit to insure is higher than if you had many doors, right? So my 5 unit, my 6 unit actually costs more to insure per unit than if I had 100 unit complex, which sounds crazy, but if you think about it, you're spreading the risk over more units, right? So that the cost goes down. And a big thing that I love to do when I go to events like this with Grant Cardone at his corporate headquarters here in Aventura is that the networking piece is key. Because if I'm going to, learn from other people, if I'm going to partner with somebody else, I want to know who they are. I want to genuinely know, what is their expertise? How long have they been investing? How many, trades have they done? And what is their philosophy? Because when the market's good, it's very easy for people to partner, but when the market shifts, or when we're in a challenging market like we are now, you want to make sure that their philosophy, their ways of approaching investments, their ideas behind what do we do in certain situations aligns with yourself. Because then when you go through a challenging market, then you can still come together, you can still collaborate, you can still figure out the best solution on how to manage an asset going forward, because we're in a challenging market. So spending that one-on-one time with people in a small environment, there was probably 100 of us in the last couple of days at this event, but not only in that room, but then also after the event, spending the time at dinners and networking and just getting to know the other partners so that we can all teach each other. We're in different markets. Some of us do different investment classes. Someone had an RV pad park, which I got to learn a lot of information about. I haven't invested myself in an RV park, so I was asking a lot of questions about, what goes into managing that. You've got the concrete pads, you've got utilities at every pad. What does that cost look like? Because that cost is so much different than doing a apartment complex and building out, we've got concrete, we've got, framing and electricity and plumbing, and all of those things cost a lot more money than obviously an RV pad. So what are the rents? What does your competition look like? Like, what states does this asset class work best in? So asking all of these questions so that I can become more knowledgeable. And if it's something that I want to invest in the future, then at least I have a contact. I know someone who's already in that market who has that expertise. So the networking piece of it is huge, because now I've got, all of these people in my world that I can go to and ask questions to. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, thinking about investing in RV parks, well, now I have someone to connect you with that I know, that I have seen, that has done this before, so that when I'm referring my clients to specific people for investments, then I understand that they're knowledgeable enough, because I don't want to make that connection to two people if I don't feel like they're going to be able to help each other. The fact that Grant Cardone can make his time available. Yes, we pay to be in this real estate club, but I don't know anybody else that you can pay to be part of their club and get such information that is just not out there for everybody to have, and to have just direct access to Grant Cardone and his team and ask questions, and for him to sit there and he'll for example, if you are looking at an apartment complex, I keep using the same example, we'll keep it simple, and we're going through the numbers and we have some questions that we just haven't been able to answer. He will get on the phone with that real estate broker and say, hey, here's my questions. And we'll be in the room with him and just seeing him at work, seeing him, what he asks when he gets on the phone, what's the important information that we need to know. And that can change. And when the market changes, those questions change. So being in this club and having this access a couple times a year, I live in South Florida, so I can go to many of the events that they put on, and just hearing, what are you asking? What's important now? What information should we be looking at that could be changing? And then asking him why. Why is that important? How did you get to that number? What are you looking at now? Where are the markets that you're looking to invest? And then figuring out how to, just kind of make that part of your normal conversations with people, because the more that I hear the terms, the more that I see the conversations, the more that we run the numbers, the more sense that it makes for me. And I'm not by any means like a huge real estate multifamily expert. I have invested in several. I have about 500 doors that I'm invested in, but I don't consider myself an expert. And I'm always going to be a student, because the more that I can learn, the more information I can provide back to my audience, like I'm doing right here, the better off we all are, the bigger impact that I have. And like someone I was interviewing today, her terminology was the ripple effect, right? So I love that visual, thinking about, if I'm talking to you and you're learning information, then you go tell somebody else, and then they change their lives by that information. Then they go and talk to somebody else. So it's incredible that we can be part of a network, that we have access to Grant Cardone and his expertise and taking action. That's a huge piece of it. You can go and get all the information that you want, but if you don't take action on it, then what is the purpose of it? Right. So that's a big part of why I do the podcast, is because I do want you to have small, simple action items that are going to have huge impacts on your life. But if you don't take the action and do that, then you're just sitting here absorbing information. You don't have a chance to impact other people, because there's always people watching you. So knowing that we're giving you information, that you're listening to podcasts, that you're absorbing this knowledge, you have to take action. And that's my purpose, is to come back from events like this to interview amazing people and to give you this information so that you can take action and have an impact on your own life and on the lives all around you and for generations in front of you. That's your purpose. So make sure that you're taking this information and putting it to use, and then making a difference with those around you and for people in front of you, and just change one life at a time. So hopefully that was some good information, just some small takeaways from the Grant Cardone Bring Your Deal workshop that I've been at for the last few days and getting back into the podcasting world. That's what I do every Thursday, recording these podcasts for you, for your information, for your benefit. So please make sure that you are sharing this podcast. Make sure that you're tuning in every week and taking the action items that apply to you in your life and making it happen. So thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning into Empower Her Money podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast, and leave a review wherever you are tuning in.